On today's show, Cam Whitmore wins Summer League MVP. What does this impressive NBA Summer League showcase mean for his role moving forward on this Houston Rockets team? Also, unfortunately, the Rockets falling just a little bit short in the championship game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And also, Ime Udoka wants Jalen Green to be a more well-rounded player. What can we expect that to look like next season? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen, Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Playing catch up a little bit here on today's episode. A few things have happened with the Houston Rockets over the last few days. Want to discuss kind of the end of basketball. Guys, we are heading into the dog days, the dark days of the NBA basketball calendar, because there is not a ton going on between now and what will ultimately be training camp for your Houston Rockets. But we will still have you covered here at Locked On Rockets with all the news, notes, rumors, reporting, and anything of relevance happening with this Rockets team, as well as taking a look forward as to what we can expect out of these Houston Rockets next season. On today's episode, I want to focus in on Cam Whitmore walking away with the Summer League MVP award, as well as what we can maybe expect his role to look like for this Houston Rockets team next season, and if it's a guarantee at this point that he'll be playing at the G League level, or will he maybe carve himself out a spot in the Rockets rotation, as well as some thoughts from Ime Udoka on what he wants Jalen Green to focus on in this next chapter of his career. Let's start with Cam Whitmore, though, because I think he was easily one of the best storylines from all of NBA Summer League, and we have to kind of drag it back a little bit and turn back the clock and focus on the storyline that followed him into Summer League, which was the fact that he plummeted, right? This was a top 10 projected talent that fell all the way into the Houston Rockets' laps at pick 20. 20! There's a really good chance, guys, that the Houston Rockets will walk away with the steal of the draft in yet the third draft in a row. Alperen Sengun the first year, back in 2021, being picked just outside the lottery and being traded to the Houston Rockets. Shout out to the OKC Thunder for doing the Rockets yet another solid. And then Tari Eason last season, pick 17. And now you've got Cam Whitmore, who slid all the way from being a consensus top 10 pick in the NBA draft, sliding all the way to pick 20. And you've got to wonder, not even wonder, you've got to at least expect that all the teams that passed on him are now kicking themselves, right? All the teams that were just ahead of the Rockets on the board, the teams that probably had no expectation for Cam Whitmore to slide as far as he did. And so much of it goes into, okay, well, why did he slide? You've got the different reasons that we've hashed out here, right? Maybe the injury concerns, the poor interviewing process, the rumors about his relationship with Kyle Neptune from Villanova, and that impacting his draft stock, all those different things. But then you also get to the fact that the teams that were on the board that weren't expecting Cam to be there probably just didn't do their research on him, right? So then you have teams that they have their guy on the board that they scouted, they worked out, they're like, we feel really good about this guy, or we take the mystery box that is Cam Whitmore. And thankfully for the Rockets, he fell all the way to them at 20, and he went out there in Summer League and showed exactly why he was billed as a top 10 prospect. The potential was there. The flashes were there. He made an impact on both sides of the basketball. There's definitely some refinement that needs to take place with his game. You see some of the raw elements of his game there. There were games where he was getting a little too trigger happy, pulling the ball from three, or moments, especially early on in games 1 and 2, before he kind of really settled into his role, where he was a little bit too ball dominant, a little bit too focused on scoring the ball. But as things kind of culminated and went along the rest of the games, getting through games 4, 5, and then 6 in the championship game, you really started to see him exploring the other parts of his game, right? And you saw those glimpses of, man, this kid is going to be so talented, right? This kid is going to be able to collapse defenses at will. He's got an NBA body ready to go, right? 6'6", 6'7", 230, 235. Defenders just like bounce off of him whenever he goes to make a move. I think the most dominant he looked was when he got kind of an open corner possession where he's kind of in the wing on either side of the court, and it didn't matter whether he was attacking going left or attacking going right, but when he can get like a straight line drive with just a couple strong, powerful dribbles where there's not a help defender in place to cheat off his man and like dig at the basketball or throw a quick trap or double team at him, it's really hard for guys to guard him one-on-one because he's so much bigger and stronger and quicker and faster and more explosive than so many of the other guys on the court. He's a really, really tough cover in one-on-one coverages. So I loved pretty much everything that we saw out of him. And the fact that he got to do everything that he did as a number 20 pick, I think maybe, I don't want to say took the weight off of his shoulders, but there's just a different set of expectations for Cam at that point, right? And he went out there and blew everybody out of the water. Just looked incredible. Walks away Summer League MVP. His stats, he wound up averaging just under 20 points per game in Summer League. He scored the most total points for any rookies in Summer League. Now, granted, he did get to play one extra game than, 95% of all of the rookies, but even going into, I think after the 4th game in Summer League, he was averaging the most points per game, like somewhere north of 20, than any other rookie that had played that many, like an equivalent number of games. Like there were a couple rookies that played like 2 games and were averaging more points scored than he was, but he played every single game. I think that's another thing that he should get credit for, right? Is there are a lot of players that either suffered a minor injury and got held out or just played 2 or 3 games. A lot of rookies, young guys who played 2 or 3 games and then got pulled. He played all 6 Summer League games. And this comes on the heels of the apparent injury concerns, right? Or the knee concerns. So I don't know, man. He looked fine out there to me. So whatever those were probably overblown at this point. You know that Cam is absolutely out there playing with a massive chip on his shoulder. You could see it when he was playing against the Utah Jazz in the championship qualifying match game just before. So the 5th Summer League game for the Rockets. That's a team that passed on him not once, but twice. So shout out to Cam Whitmore for going out there, playing his game, proving the naysayers wrong, and the Rockets, again, walking away with what might be widely regarded like 6 months down the line from now as the 3rd consecutive steal of the draft that this time around just kind of fell into Rafael Stone's lap. Like, I will give 100% credit for the Alperen Sengun trade and picking him up and then selecting Tari Eason at pick 17 after other teams were passing on him due to some reported, basketball IQ concerns and whatever, negative scuttlebutt was following him during the pre-draft process. Cam Whitmore just kind of lucked out. Like, that was some luck that this Rockets organization really needed, because to be able to walk away with not only Ime Thompson at pick number 4, but then to also have Cam kind of fall into your lap at pick 20 is the exact type of luck that you need when you're an organization that is exiting phase 1 of the rebuild, and this is the final phase of the talent accumulation portion of the rebuild. And man, is there a lot of talent there, and Cam certainly had that on display for everybody in Summer League. So shout out to Cam for winning Summer League MVP. It's nice to have another MVP in Rockets Red. Coming up, want to talk about what Cam's role might actually look like for this Rockets team next season, as well as getting into a little bit of the championship game that the Rockets played against the Cavaliers, as well as Ime Udoka's vision for Jalen Green further down the line. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to over-unders to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, really quickly, before getting into what Cam Whitmore's role may or may not look like next season for this Rockets team, because that has been a topic of contention amongst Rockets fans, it feels like, in recent days and weeks. First, the championship game. It's disappointed. It's disappointing, I should say. I'm disappointed. We're all disappointed. I was ready to raise the Summer League banner up to the rafters of Toyota Center. It would have been very cool to be able to talk about a 6-0 Summer League season for this Rockets team. Against the Cavaliers, they just didn't have the needed size to combat them on the interior. You saw Isaiah Mobley was out there having a field day. He looked like prime Kareem out there against those Rockets. They just really didn't have an answer for him on the interior. And then this is one of the downsides of having such a heavy, an offense predicated heavily on three-point shooting, is the Rockets were just in such a rut with the three-point shooting. There was a stretch where they made like 6 triples in a row in the second quarter, and like they were catching back up. They basically dug themselves out of like a 15 point something deficit in the second quarter and made things competitive, getting towards the halftime frame. But outside of that, like at one point they were like 3 of 22 outside of like the 6 triples that they hit in a row. They were just really struggling to hit from beyond the arc. The Cavaliers were doing a really great job of running them off the three-point line, making some, really difficult contests on the three-point line. You had some moments early in the game where like Hudgens and Whitmore were forcing from behind the three-point line, where they were kind of taking some contested threes that were maybe a bit more ill-advised. Shout out to the Cavaliers for doing a good job sticking to their game plan, understanding that the Rockets wanted to shoot a ton of threes and that that's exactly what they were going to do. And sometimes, look, you live by the three, you die by the three. And that's how we saw the Rockets dumpstering opponents in the previous 5 games. They stayed true to their goal, their vision, though, in Game 6. And unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way that they wanted it to. But I commend them nonetheless. It was a really impressive showing from the Houston Rockets Summer League squad. I do want to share some thoughts about Nate Hinton a little bit later on in the show as well. Looking at Cam Whitmore, though, I think it's going to be really tough for Ime Udoka and this Rockets coaching staff to look at the talent that Cam Whitmore has and basically just be resigned to the idea of, he's going to go play with the G League. My understanding of how the Rockets plan to approach training camp, and Ime has been pretty transparent about this up to this point, is that guys are going to have to earn their minutes, right? Nothing is going to be given. Guys are going to have to fight for their role. Even guys like Jalen and Jabari are going to have to fight to earn their minutes, right? And there's a legitimate argument there, depending on how training camp goes. KPJ and or Tari Eason might actually outplay one or if not both of those guys, right? And maybe those guys are your starters moving forward. Do I think that's likely? Absolutely not. My best bet for what the starting lineup looks like next season is Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen and Sengun at the 5. And I think that's by and large the consensus starting lineup. But then you start getting into the reserves, right? And Jae'Sean Tate, like it or not, it has a role on this Rockets team. If he's on the team come opening night, he's not just a warm body sitting at the end of the bench. This Rockets organization really values what he brings to the table. And honestly, I do think Rockets fans are kind of forgetting what he can bring to the table. Like, I think a lot of Rockets fans are really down on Jae'Sean Tate. And I am curious. Like, Jae'Sean Tate to me is basically a slightly smaller Dillon Brooks. It's basically what he provides, right? He does a lot of the exact same things that Dillon Brooks does. He's just a little bit smaller, right? Brooks is about 6'6", 6'7", give or take. Slightly bigger body. Jae'Sean Tate, 6'4", not quite the wingspan. but he gives you a lot of the same, right? Energy, intensity, hustle, does the dirty work, struggles shooting the ball. The similarities kind of go across the board. So when you look at it from that perspective, I think that Tate will have a role on this team, assuming he's still on the team come opening night. Tari Eason's obviously going to have a role on this team. The question becomes, where does Cam Whitmore slot in, right? Because there's no minutes for him. And I see this argument that's being thrown out there. Well, why are the Rockets going to guarantee Ime Thompson, minutes in the rotation and a spot, amongst the 8, 9, 10-man rotation, whatever, and not Cam Whitmore? They're both rookies. They're both drafted. Well, first off, it comes to depth. Like, tell me you don't understand a depth chart without telling me you don't understand a depth chart. Fred VanVleet and Ime Thompson are the 2 point guards on this Rockets roster. So, of course, Ime Thompson is going to get backup point guard minutes. Ooh, voice crack. Love that. Backup point guard minutes by default because he is the backup point guard, right? Kevin Porter Jr. is no longer occupying that role for this Rockets team. He might handle some playmaking, responsibilities here and there, but he's not going to be a primary playmaker anymore for this Rockets team, is my expectation for how they approach this next season. So you get to Cam Whitmore, and what does his role look like in training camp, right? He was on NBA Today with Kendrick Perkins and kind of talking about, what he envisions doing for this team down the line. And he was basically saying, look, I'll do whatever coach needs me to do, right? If he needs me to be a defensive stopper, cool. If he needs me to bring the ball up the court, I'll do that. If he needs me to be a shooter, I'll be a shooter. If he needs me to be a playmaker, I'll be a playmaker. And so his mentality was just, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get on the court, to get minutes, right? And that type of mentality and the massive chip that Cam Whitmore carries on his shoulder at all times, that has only quadrupled in size since the NBA draft, I fully expect him to actually make training camp really interesting for the Rockets, to the point where I was saying for a while that I pretty much kind of had it chalked up to, past tense, had it chalked up to the fact that Cam Whitmore was probably going to spend an extensive amount of time with the Vipers at the G League level, right? At this point, I really don't know what that's going to look like, because if he goes into training camp and if he's outplaying Jae'Sean Tate, then why would you send him to the G League, right? If he looks better and if he's a better complementary piece to the other guys in the rotation over a guy like Jae'Sean Tate, or if he outplays a Tari Eason in training camp, then he absolutely deserves those minutes over those guys. That's the whole point about bringing Ime Udoka in and having a different level of expectations, a different level of requirements for if you're going to be getting rotation minutes, right? You need to be better than the next guy on the bench, right? You're not just going to get your minutes just because anymore. And based on what we saw out of Cam Whitmore, I think that guys like Tate, Tari, obviously Dillon, they're all probably going to have the edge on him just from a defensive perspective. Although what we saw out of Cam and the moments where he really did lock in defensively during Summer League give me a lot of hope and optimism that he can be an early contributor on that end of the floor. That can be how he earns significant playing time really quickly out of the gate. Like if you're coming in as a rookie and you're a defensive nightmare on a team that's trying to win games, it doesn't matter how good you are on the offensive end, probably because Cam is not going to be like option 1 or 2 or even 3 if he's on the floor with guys like Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr. and Fred VanVleet. Like he's not going to be the first, second, or even third option at times. He has to be able to make an impact on the other end of the floor. He has to be able to do the other things, some of the dirty work, to be able to earn those minutes, things that, Jabari had to do this past season or that Tari had to do to earn his playing time, right? Get rebounds, fight for loose balls, play good defense, make the hustle plays. And we saw enough of that out of him in Summer League that gives me some confidence that he can do that and do it well enough to maybe beat out one of these other guys for some legitimate rotation minutes out of the gate this next season for the Rockets. So I was very ready to just subscribe to the idea that Cam Whitmore would be with the Vipers for like half the season to start the year, because it's either you keep him on the bench as like the 13th man on the roster and he's never getting any legitimate rotation minutes and he'll just get, the occasional garbage time minutes here and there, or you send him down to the Vipers where he gets 30 plus minutes a night and gets to hone and refine and work on his skills every single day or every other day during actual games with legitimate 5-on-5 play, referees, crowds, all that, and gets to really work on his game. And I'm torn on which one would be better for him, because at this point, he probably is way too talented to be in the G League, but it also doesn't do him any benefit, any help to just let him rot on the end of a bench, because you've got 10 guys ahead of him in the actual rotation, and there just aren't any minutes for him to get on a nightly basis. So it's kind of a weird catch-22 position for the Rockets to be in, but it is a very good problem to have. And ultimately, I said this when they brought in Fred VanVleet for Jalen Green, for Kevin Porter Jr., iron sharpens iron, right? Having Cam Whitmore there, a young guy who's as hungry as he is with the chip on his shoulder, all that, to compete for minutes from guys like Tari, Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., hell, even Dillon Brooks, right? Dillon Brooks isn't going to have anything given to him. If Dillon Brooks comes in, and looks like the worst player out of those 4 guys, then I would fully expect Ime Udoka to not just, here, Dillon, have the starting role. We'll see how it all plays out. But that level of competitive nature and guys really fighting for their spots on this team can only do good things for the internal competition and the internal development of these young guys moving forward. Coming up, do want to share some additional Summer League thoughts, as well as Ime Udoka's goal and vision for Jalen Green next season. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Some quick additional Summer League thoughts before transitioning completely away from Summer League. And that's Nate Hinton, who I really thought was kind of a standout during his play with the Rockets in Summer League. I'm glad he got a chance with the Rockets. He's a University of Houston product. Go Cougs. I got the chance to cover Nate back when he was a freshman with UH men's basketball, and he is the exact same player back then that he is today, or he's the same player today that he was back then. I'm getting my words all twisted around. Obviously, he's grown. He's developed quite a bit since then, but same type of player, brings a lot of the same things to a basketball court. And I'm a little surprised that he hasn't found a more permanent role with an NBA team yet to this point, because he very much reminds me of a Jose Alvarado or a Patrick Beverley type, where he's just that pesky nuisance on defense, where like he checks into the game and guys are looking over their shoulder like, oh, I gotta deal with Nate now. Like, God, like I got this guy hounding me for the next 5 minutes until he checks out. Always plays with his motor at 110%, and that's what he did for the Rockets Summer League team. And I would very much like to see the Rockets, at least if he doesn't get a chance with another team, I'd love to see the Rockets, give him an Exhibit 10 deal, right? Bring him back to training camp this next season. Let him be a part of Rockets training camp. And, he's just the type of guy, the type of player that I think any player that can kind of hang their hat on defense the way that Nate does. And again, he's from a Kelvin Sampson program, so defense and rebounding are like just hammered into every single player that comes through the doors of University of Houston and that basketball program. But anybody who can make an impact on the game the way that he does, especially on the defensive side of the court, can probably carve themselves out a role at the NBA level. All it takes is like a brief window, right, where maybe a guy goes down due to injury and he gets the call up on a 2-way deal and he gets 5 or 10 games to really prove himself, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes a night. That type of player can make you some winning plays and can swing a game. And those types of players, I think, are big momentum guys, right? Like you think of the Jose Alvarados, the Patrick Beverleys, and how they get their teammates amped up, they get the crowd into it, they make those hustle plays, diving for loose balls, pickpocket steals, going the other way in transition for easy 2 points, all those little things that those pesky nuisance type defenders do. That's exactly what Nate Hinton can bring to the court. And while I'm not saying that he has a role in this Rockets team, that I'm projecting him to be a part of the rotation or anything down the line, I'm just saying maybe take a flyer on him, right? Like at this point, Matthew Mayer showed the Rockets a lot with his ability to shoot, rebound, and defend for a 6'9" forward. Like that's the kind of guy you take a flyer on, right? He's basically a bigger Garrison Matthews who is not afraid to shoot the ball, has good shooting touch, quick release, all of that. And then Nate Hinton, another guy, good size, good combo guard size, can defend ones and twos, can get out in transition and finish at the rim, can defend at a very high level, great point of attack guy. These are the types of guys that you maybe want to take a little bit of a flyer on. House them, keep them at the G League level, right? Stash them away with the Vipers. And then if something opens up further down the line, maybe you have an injury or whatever, maybe you make a trade and you have to consolidate some pieces and you need an extra body, then, you call on one of those guys and see if they're ready to fulfill some minutes at the NBA level. But being able to flesh out your farm system is going to be a really, really crucial and important part of every NBA organization going down the line, moving forward with the new implications of the CBA in place and how taxing it is going to be for teams that have to pay multiple, 2, 3, 4 max level deals to these players. And the Rockets are one of those teams that are hoping to potentially be in that position further down the line, right? As Jalen Green and Sengun and Jabari and Tari and Ime and Cam, as these guys all are growing and developing and, moving into their rookie extension deals and all of that, you're hoping that the Rockets have hit on some star level players out of at least like 2 of these guys, hopefully more than that, but at least 2 of them, right? And if that's the case, then you're going to need to be able to establish your farm system and be able to have younger guys, minimum level guys, two-way guys who are on cheap, cost-controlled team deals, team-friendly deals, to be able to be impact guys when you're competing at a very high level, right? So this is a good opportunity for the Rockets to start trying to evaluate some of that talent and figuring out, hey, we think there's some talent there. We want to stash them at the G League, hold on to their rights, and maybe they become a player for us a little bit further down the line. So we'll see how it pans out. I really do like what we saw out of Mayer and what we saw out of Nate Hinton, though, in Summer League. Shout out to Fletcher McGee as well. Fletcher stepped in and just started dominating out of nowhere. His college shooting percentages are absurd. He holds the NCAA record for 3-point shooting percentage and free throw percentage, I believe, all time or something like that. If I remember reading it correctly, I saw it in passing. I don't have it written in my show notes over here, unfortunately, but Fletcher McGee, he is the real spiritual successor to Garrison Matthews. Look, the Rockets need a token white boy shooter somewhere on the roster, so might as well go grab one of those guys and just throw him on a 2-way deal and call it a day. Last thing that I wanted to touch base on here was during the Rockets championship game, JJ Redick and why am I blanking? Not Mark Jackson. Oh man, I'm blanking. I'm doing this in the middle of the episode, and I love this man so much. Mark Jones, there we go. I almost said Mark Jackson. I was like, that's not right. I was blanking. I knew it was a Mark J name. Mark Jones and JJ Redick calling the championship game for NBA Summer League. They brought in Ime Udoka off the sideline to, ask him some questions, have him shed some light on his goals for this Rockets team next season. And I thought one of the things he said when asked about Jalen Green was interesting, because he's reiterated this multiple times now, and that's why I find it kind of interesting. When asked about Jalen and kind of what he sees there and what his expectations are for Jalen moving forward, he talked about wanting to make Jalen a more well-rounded player. He identified, he's like, hey, we know that Jalen can score at an elite level. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he talked about Jalen's ability to score the ball, but he also talked then about how they want Jalen to be able to impact the game in other ways, and they want to make him a more well-rounded player. And that actually harkens back to his introductory press conference where he drew comparisons to some of the guys that he worked with in Boston, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and how his goal for them was to make them more well-rounded players, because he came in and he knew that they could score the basketball. But then he came in and he challenged those guys to become better defenders, to become better playmakers, to elevate the entirety of the team, to elevate the play of the other 4 guys on the court with them, or the other 3 guys on the court with them, whatever, because it's a 5-player game, right? You've got teammates on the court, to elevate the play of the team using their abilities, right? Their gravity, their scoring gravity, their ability to break down a defense, all of that. And hearing Ime kind of reiterate that point and having heard him make that point multiple times, I really feel like Ime is going to very much challenge Jalen Green to take that next step in his game, right? For Jalen, for me, we've seen him almost really by necessity when Kevin got injured this past season, step into more of a playmaking role where he had playmaking duties, where he was in charge of running the offense and making decisions on the floor, running pick and roll, doing all those things. And we've seen him have moments where he does lock in defensively, right? We've seen him lock down Trae Young at the end of a closely contested game against the Hawks. We've seen him have moments where he makes really good, strong defensive plays. It's just not consistent yet. If Ime Udoka can get Jalen Green to buy into those elements of Jalen's game and them being way more consistent parts of his game, then I think Jalen could be poised to take a significant leap this next season. For me, it's three areas, right? Can Jalen continue to grow and evolve as a playmaker and defender? Those are the two big obvious ones. But then the other part is, as it relates back to his scoring, can he be a more efficient scorer? And I think that Ime is going to unlock a lot for Jalen and install some things offensively to make life easier for Jalen. I don't necessarily need to see Jalen take another leap for his raw scoring numbers. I don't need to see him go from 22 a game to 25 or 26 or 27. I just want to see him be an efficient scorer. In fact, I'd be cool if his points per game dropped a little bit to 20, but if he was doing it on good efficiency, we're talking let's say 57.5%, 58% true shooting. If he can get up to that range from where he was at, then that to me is a monumental leap. And if he can add further develop his defense and playmaking to go along with it, with all the other pieces that the Rockets are bringing in and the other internal growth and development of other guys on the roster as well, how good Jabari Smith Jr. looked during Summer League, the sky's the limit for this Rockets team next season. So I really do think, again, hearing Ime Udoka talk about the importance of making Jalen a well-rounded player, that is very much going to be a focal point of the Rockets' development plan this next season. It's not just about, okay, Jalen can get buckets, right? We know Jalen can get buckets. What else can he do on the floor to help his team win? And we know with the competitive drive that Jalen Green has and the amount of work that he pours in, that he's up for the challenge. So I'm excited to see what that partnership continues to grow and build. And I've said it before, and I'll say it one more time. I think Ime Udoka is the best thing that could have happened for Jalen Green this offseason to further unlock his game and to build his NBA career. So with that, those are final thoughts from today's episode. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.